Hugh, talk to me about how you developed a sensitivity to art. I mean, where did that come from? Who were the major influences in causing that to happen?
Well, I think as a boy, my mother was an artist, and she had her own studio behind the house. Daddy had, it had been a garden, I would say a garden shed. Daddy made over into a studio for Mother. And she basically worked in drawings, charcoal drawings, some painting, or watercolor. And she did a lot of modeling with clay. And I think when I was a little boy, the first time I ever saw a nude was Mother had them all rolled up, and you know, we kids would go and look. We went in there and found Mother's paintings of, and I don't know who her models were, but she did a lot of work. Well, flash forward many, many years. When I was 40 years old, my wife wanted to have a portrait of me done by Ben Long. Her friend Ida Wickham had a private art business, and she was representing Ben at that time. And so I sat with Ben Long up in the mountains, and that studio of that famous painter up there, whose name I've lost for the moment. But anyway, I sat for 2 or 3 days, a long weekend, while Ben did a drawing of me. And it's in my house, and it's a perfect likeness, to be honest. And at that time, I got to know Ben because he was a Marine. He had gone to the University of North Carolina, things that I'd done. And we hit it off from the get-go. And that then led to my involvement with Ben and his friends in art. But I guess the most important teacher I had, clearly, was Ann McKenna. And she began to invite me to soirees at her house where she would have Ben and other artists, and she would have their works. And I began to collect Ben's paintings and some works of other artists, but primarily Ben. And so I think of her as my mentor and teacher and guide. Sort of on the way to the Forum, she got me to do a lot of things. So one of which, the early things, she got me to help finance the St. Peter's fresco. And at that time is when I really got to know Ben Long, Laura Buxton, Roger Nelson. At night, I'd work all day and be out of town, come back into town, go down to the church and watch them work on the fresco. Well, fresco painting is, you know, very different. And so that's when I really became close to this group of artists and remain close to them even today. So that I just met with Roger Nelson 2 days ago here at the gallery. And I see Ben off and on, but not as often as I used to. But Chuck Kapsner and I have stayed in touch. And over the years, I've bought art from all of them, particularly Laura Buxton, who I acquired a collection that she did in Bosnia in about 41 pieces, and I subsequently had a book published about it, and then I gave it to Appalachian State University last year, that collection, so that it would be displayed and taught around, because it's really a documentary of the war in Bosnia.
Talk to me about Ann McKenna. Talk to me about what's your memories of her as a person. What was she like as a human being?
Well, Ann, well, first as a human being, I mean, I really liked her. I mean, practically loved her. She was just a terrific person, and we had a strong attraction to each other in a sort of I don't know exactly what kind of way, just we were both interested in art. She had a lot of fun, and she was a fun person. We liked to take a drink and of champagne or good wine or whatever. And she was very well informed about many, many subjects, so that she was an interesting woman to talk with and to be around. And so I spent a lot of time up at her house, looking at art and talking art. And she and Kitty were a pair. You remember, Ann's father was a minister. Not a minister, something higher than that, a bishop, I guess. Episcopal, maybe? Or Catholic? No, Catholic. They were Catholic. And anyway, I used to kid her about that. And but she would get forgiven for drinking with all of us when we were talking art. But anyway, she was a terrific person and very knowledgeable about art. And she not only was good at promoting Ben and taking care of Ben, but she was almost like his mother. And Ben needed someone to channel him. But she did that. And all in all, I just thought the world of her.
Well, now, how exactly did you get involved in the project to erect a statue to Hugh McColl?
Well, almost everything I ever got involved in around the arts area, Ann would come to me and say, "Don't you think we need X?" And so, yeah, we need X, so we'd go do X. Well, Ann came to me about the statue to Hugh McColl. And I thought that it was a good idea, and so I gave her some money. And, with Ann, whatever amount of money it was, you were going to do it, so you might as well go on and do it, because she's going to keep asking you. But I don't remember precisely when that was, but I had been exposed to Hugh for a long time, and my children had. Hugh hung out at the Townhouse, which was Salem Super's famous restaurant. And as a young person, when I was working at the bank, we'd go by for breakfast very early in the morning, and Hugh would always be there. And he would give you some biblical lecture, which of course went past me completely. But over the years, I realized that he was a very interesting person. He not only knew a lot about the Bible, but he knew a lot about a lot of things. So he would also quote poetry and philosophy. So my impressions are now, thinking back on it, he must have been extremely well read. And so you never knew what was going to come out of his mouth, though. He ate there. He ate all his meals there at the Townhouse and charged them. And he had a trust account at the American Commercial Bank, NCNB, Nations Bank, really going back, I think, to American Trust days, that his father had set up a trust for him. And so he was a very familiar figure, and as you probably know, he used to stand in the center of that intersection where Providence, Queens come together, and stand in the corner and direct traffic in the middle of remarkable traffic. He would be standing in the middle signaling which way to go. And he always had a hat on, and I think the statue has his hat. And maybe not. I don't know that the statue has a hat on it. But anyway, he always had a hat on, sort of a pork pie hat, and he was always directing traffic. And then if the light stopped, he might come up to a car and recite a poem or a biblical passage to the people in the car. And so he became a fixture. So when Ann came to me about the statue for him, it seemed just very logical. He'd been there so long as I could remember, he was standing at the intersection. And the only thing that disappointed me about the statue was that I thought we ought to put it dead in the center of the intersection and have a roundabout, so to speak. And anything would improve that intersection, as you know. It's a tough intersection. But anyway, we couldn't get that done. Now, we actually tried to get that done. Ann and I both wanted to put it dead in the center of the intersection, but the state, you know, that's Highway 16. People forget that. Providence Road is really a state road.
Well, now, how do you answer? You know, I told you the story about Milton Short.
Yeah.
How do you answer the argument that you know, why in the world you want to celebrate this man who was, to say the least, no major contributor to the advancement of the community? Why do you want to celebrate him?
Well, I think that the same reason we celebrate a lot of things about our history. In other words, he's as much a part of the fabric of the Charlotte that I came to as anybody I know. So he was part of the fabric of the community. And arguably, let's say in the affluent part of town, as well known as anybody, including some of our mayors, our councilmen. And so I think that it reminds us of our past, and I think he was an important person in that sense of the word. And he was much beloved in an odd sort of way. Now, he used to sit at Eckerd's and he would eat lunch at Eckerd's a lot of the time, the old Eckerd's down in that shopping center. And my children would ride their bikes up there to get a Coke or something, and he would give them a lecture, a biblical lecture, and he scared them at first. You know, some of this older person, I don't know how old he was, but you know, to a child, everybody looks older. So he probably scared them at first, but then they became used to him and, you know, liked him. And I think all of us were that way. I probably, when I was in my 20s, thought, what's this guy bothering me for? Because he would come by your table and recite something to you. And at first I was annoyed, but then it was just a fixture, as much a part of Charlotte as the tower is.
Talk to me a little bit about how you feel about public art in general. I mean, you know, Tony Zeiss has really put a lot of energy behind this Little Sugar Creek Canal. And his first sort of foray into the artwork for that is a large equestrian statue of this fella, Captain Jack, who carried a document up to the Continental Congress in 1775. There's some controversy about what he had in his saddlebag, but he definitely took a document up there.
Yeah.
You think Tony Zeiss did a good thing to have that put up there?
Well, yes, of course. I must think that since I contributed to it. I'll give someone else credit for asking me, not Tony. But anyway, yes, and for a lot of reasons. First, again, it's our history. It's we have 1 million people living here now. When I came here, there were much less. Probably we've had 750,000 people move here in the last decade, or certainly the last 15 years. And they don't know this area. And so having things that remind people of where they are and where we came from, I think is important. Now, further to that point, I think that public art is very important because it makes people think. It adds beauty, but it also adds intellectual stimulus, like, you know, the new statue down there in front of the Beckler. It's a very intriguing piece of art. It reminds us that all the art that we grew up with is not the only kind of art. I think it's very, very positive. I think if you ask the law enforcement officers, the policemen, they like having they feel honored to have the fresco in the law enforcement building, something that I helped get Ben Long to do. And it's been a great thing, and it's public art, but it also says to the policemen, we think you're important. It's not that, you know, that everybody should be able to view art. So public art is very important. I think the originally when Mr. Reese was chairman of the bank is when we put Pomodoro in front of the 40-story glass tower we built in 1974, and that was a very expensive piece of public art. And but I think it's stood the test of time, and we love having it there. And there are many, many other good pieces of art. Now, as you know, we've had controversy around it, and some people think it's a waste of money, but they're wrong. It makes the city feel like people live here, and it has brought innumerable visitors in to look at various pieces of public art that we have.
As you know, going back to the Hugh McColl statue, I've been going up there for the last month or so. Whenever there's a new adornment put on him,
Yeah.
people are going up there and sticking stuff on him all the time. I mean, it's just incredible how they put all this stuff. Now, I'm sure that you've driven through that abominable intersection, and you've noticed that. How does it make? What's your reaction? How does it make you feel when you look over and see that somebody has taken this statue and has put stuff on it? How does that make you feel?
Well, I think it makes me feel good because it means that the statue is alive and breathing, so to speak. I mean, Hugh is still out there, and the students, mainly from Queens and from Myers Park and other schools, will dress him up, or weddings. At weddings, you'll come sometime and there's a bow around his neck, and you know, all kind of things that remind, or let's say, pieces of lace or whatever, having to do with the wedding. So we have wedding celebrants there at the churches that are right along the way, and we have graduates doing it. And so I think it's exciting because, I mean, it proves, hey, they like the statue, and they view that as part of the scene.
But isn't it silly?
Well, not really. I mean, you could say a lot of things are silly. You could say a group of old men going crazy over a touchdown at the University of North Carolina is crazy, but I mean, all the way we get all excited about our basketball teams and football teams. So no, I don't think it's silly.
Well, let me ask you now, this may be something that you did you ever have an opportunity to know who Elsie Shaw was, the woman who did the McManaway statue? Did you ever meet her?
I met her, but I never really knew her. I think I met her through Ann, and I think Ann had another statue done at the same time, you know, that stood in her front yard for many years, and that she gave to Queens. I don't know whether she gave it to the Queens before she died or bequeathed it to Queens, but it's on the Queens campus, and of course we love having it, and I think that's one of her statues as well.
Do you have, you know, I'm really struck by the fact that you think people who question the use of even public funds to put up art, there's some people who think this is not really a prudent use of public resources. I was struck by the fact that you do believe that is a very important use of public resources.
Well, if you think about public resources being for the public and all the public, then the idea of bringing art outside of our museums and outside, let's say, our affluent private homes makes sense. In other words, the money belongs to the public, ergo if we spend it for something that enhances public life, then I think that's a good thing. And there are many things that we spend money on to enhance public life, like sidewalks, just to illustrate. And there are a lot of people that wouldn't spend money on sidewalks. But, you know, that's where you walk, and that's where you should push your strollers instead of the street, I might add. But since you live over here, you know what I'm talking about. But But I think that's exactly what public money is supposed to do, is be spent on the public, the entire public. And so I think art does a lot. It enriches our lives. It causes us a lot of times to stop and think, like, what was the artist saying to us here? What should we take away from this? And as you know, people take away many different things from a piece of art. So everyone doesn't take away the same thing.
And I get the feeling that you're supportive of different genres of art being used as public art. That obviously something like Captain Jack is very different than what's in front of the Beckler, but you see them all. You see different.
I see them as the same. They're for different purposes. I mean, Captain Jack, I think, is a piece of art, but it's also a very important piece of history. And so I think it serves an important role as it relates to history. You could argue it's like the Vietnam Memorial or all our war memorials. They serve to remind us of periods of our history that people forget about. And in fact, we all have children or grandchildren who have no knowledge of these wars. I mean, Vietnam to me seems yesterday, but, you know, to even my daughter, who's got 3 children, she was hardly 3 years old when that war was over, you know. So those kind of things matter. Things that speak to the public and also speak to our past and stimulate us to ask questions about it.
Would you like to ask him a question?
What do you think Hugh would think of the statue?
Well, I think Hugh would like it, but I bet Hugh would like it in the middle of the intersection. Because that's where he stood. Rain or shine, he was out there directing traffic. And there's more traffic and Hugh would have more to do, but he was quite good.
Do you have a question you'd like to ask him?
Sure. Well, I'm one of those people that's moved here. I'm from Louisiana originally. And so when I first moved here and I saw that statue, I was just kind of like, you know, well, what is it? I had no clue what it meant or anything about its significance. So do you think there are any other interesting aspects about Charlotte, or I guess
eccentricities? Yes.
Our tongue twister for the day. But any other eclectic aspects of Charlotte you think could be highlighted in a similar fashion?
Well, you know, that's a great question. I don't actually know the answer to that. We have struggled in many respects with holding on to our history. And there are many critics of me for tearing down old buildings, albeit they were really not very pretty. And they were built really in the 50s and 40s, not really, weren't hundreds of years old buildings. So arguably Charlotte has destroyed a lot of its old buildings. Maybe a lot of them were destroyed earlier in previous, whatever you wish to call them, restorations. But I think, for instance, to answer the question directly, we used to have a very big neighborhood called Brooklyn, which was mainly African Americans living in shotgun houses. And we have, during a period of what was called urban renewal, but was really urban clearance in the 60s, they destroyed all these houses. And this is now known as Second Ward, I believe. And it was known as Second Ward then as well. And to me, that it might be useful to have while we have a Martin Luther King statue in that area, I think it might be more interesting to have a statue to, I think it's Sweet Daddy Grace, there where the tabernacle was, the church, whose name escapes me at the moment. This happens when you're older. So yeah, I think there are other people we could honor. I think they're eclectically that speak to the history of our city. Certainly, I'm a newcomer. I've only been here 53 years, and you know, the city's very old. And my wife's ancestor, I think, 10 times great grandfather was Thomas Spratt, and his statue is going to be along the creek. Kanawha Spratt, who was really the first white man on this side of to come across the river as a trapper. And he settled here with the Catawbas, so that's going to be, I think the statue is going to be King Hagler and Kanawha Spratt. And that's going to be at the very first of right up there above Captain Jack. So there are a lot of people that we could honor. I want to go back to whether it's silly or not to have public art. One of the great things about Charlotte is the beautiful flowers we have in our intersections and in our medians. And we had a mayor that did that many, many years ago. He started that. I think it was Mayor Brookshire. I could be wrong. Could have been somebody before him. But we keep doing it, and that's expensive, and it's public money beautifying our city. But who would argue that that's a bad idea? So the art is the same thing. One is living, the other is man-made, but they're both important.
Is that it?
I'm good.
Is that it? I want to tell you one thing for you. Let's go off camera. Click it off.